The purpose of this video is to show you how to set up the structure of your Moodle course. Now that you have access to your practice Moodle course, let's see how you might set it up. The first thing you're going to need to do is open a browser. If you're at school, you're going to have Microsoft Internet Explorer. If you're at home, you're probably going to have some options like Mozilla Firefox, Google Chrome, or if you're on a Mac, the Safari browser. The only one of those to avoid when using Moodle is Chrome, because not all of the editing tools in Moodle will be available to you. So I'm going to fire up Mozilla Firefox. And once I'm there, I'm going to navigate out to our Moodle site, moodle.gcsnc.com, log in, and then navigate to, well, you will navigate to your practice Moodle course. Once you open your Moodle course, you're going to see three basic panes. One on the left and one on the right, which contain what we call blocks, and one in the middle, which contains your course content. Now, before I can begin to manipulate any of these items, I have to turn editing on in the upper right hand corner, and you'll notice that some additional controls show up here beside each item and underneath each block. So let's take blocks first. Blocks are little tools that you can make available to your users. So as examples, I have a calendar here that I can make available, which if I had assignments due on a particular day, they would show up on this calendar. Under administration, you have a lot of things, most of which you won't use, some of which you will use often, like settings and grades and potentially groups and files. The others of those you won't use so much, but you need to have this block available so that when you come into Moodle, you have these right here at your disposal. What a student will see for administration is just this profile link, which allows them to go in and change their picture, things like that. My courses is another block that I like to use, because if a student has more than one teacher using Moodle, then all of their courses show up here. Same for you. If you're enrolled in or teaching multiple Moodle courses, they're all right here. So it makes it very easy to quickly jump from one course to the other, rather than having to back out to the main Moodle screen, find your course, and then go into it. Other blocks you'll find the ability to add down here. I'm not going to talk about what these are. You can just play with them, add them, and see what they do. So once you have the blocks added that you want, you can move them around. I typically move everything to the right, just because that's my personal preference. You may like them on both sides or all on the left. And I typically only use my courses and administration. To get rid of a block that you don't want, you just click the X. If you want to leave it there but not show it, you click this little I. And then when my screen refreshes, you'll see that it's closed up, and that means that anything with this I closed is not going to show up when students come in. And you can always see what things look like to student by switching your role to a student. And you'll see now, under administration, all I have is this profile link. I have my courses. I do not see that calendar block because it's hidden. And you'll also see why I like to put all of my stuff on one side, because my content pane grows a little larger. If I return to my normal role, I need to turn editing back on. This time I'm going to show the calendar, and I'm going to move it over to the left side by using this left arrow. Notice that I could also move it up above my courses by clicking the up arrow. And now there it is between administration and my courses. I'm going to move it to the left by using this left arrow, and I have already clicked the I, so it's now showing. And you'll see when I go back to student, now I have a smaller content pane. So this is why I like to put all my blocks on one side or the other. Again, you may have different preferences. Okay, I'm going to turn editing back on, and I'm going to get rid of calendar, which should leave all my blocks on the right hand side. And now we can talk more about this middle pane. What you're doing is you're adding specific items to the content pane. And in a previous video, we talked about some of those most commonly used items, what they are. So to do that, I'm going to pick a block that I'm in, and we'll talk more about how this is laid out. But mine is currently laid out in topics. So if I wanted to add something to this topic, I can add a resource. You can see there what my options are. Notice there's a difference here in how they behave. If I do a link to a file or website, then whatever gets put there, like this, is going to take me directly out to that link. So there was the link it took me to. I'm now out of Moodle. If I were to do something like a web page, once I create it, I'm just going to call this a test. And then I can put a description, but I want to just do my web page here. Once I do this, and I save and return to course, there it is. You'll see I have the ability to move it around. When I click it, it takes me to another page inside of Moodle. So the point in saying all that is that this content area isn't your sole place for putting everything. You can link out to the web. You can link to other pages inside your Moodle site. So this could be its own assignment or its own unit or its own anything. And I could have had this open inside of this same window instead of opening up a new pop-up window. Those are all controls that we'll talk about a little bit later. So that's sort of how you drop things into this area. Some are resources, as I mentioned, some are activities. So here's where you get a lot of the other things we did, like this was the topic choice, where you chose what topic you wanted to research for a project. This is the survey feedback. Here was my test. Here's where I'm going to create assignments where you can upload files, etc. We'll play with that a little bit later. Anyway, so now that you know how these things get here, let's talk about how you might lay your course out. You really have two options, and I'm going to find those options by going to Settings. And once I'm here, you'll notice that I rarely put anything in these description boxes. I'm going to go to Format. So this Settings applies to my whole course. And the two we want to look at right now are Format and Theme. So Format, there's several things in here. Lambs, don't worry about it. SCORM, don't worry about it. Both of these are elements that we don't use at Guilford County Schools. I can use a social format, a topics format, and a weekly format. This is just a slightly different look and feel for the weekly format. Social, I'll go ahead and show you what this looks like, is going to organize everything around a discussion board, which I don't have one set up, but I can set up a discussion board and it will put that in here, and underneath you will see things. You'll see all the discussion threads and who's been participating, things like that. If this is what you want, Moodle's probably not your best tool. You probably would be more, you'd find it easier to work with something like Edmodo. So I'm going to come out of here and show you weekly. A weekly format is going to change those blocks that I had formatted from just numbers to actually giving it a date range based on the week. So I would set what is the beginning date and the end date of my course, and it would go ahead and put in here the dates of each week. Now, this works great if everyone is doing the same things and things are due at the same time, which is the traditional approach to teaching. So this might work for you. The one disadvantage to consider is when things change. So let's say that I don't get all the way through the material for this week here that I thought I was going to get to, and I need to push it in the next week. Now I actually have to come in here and start moving things from here into the next week. Whereas if I use topics, so I'm coming back to Settings, and I'm going to change my format to topics. Now I have the same layout, I just don't have the dates shown there. The disadvantage, of course, is that kids won't necessarily know where they should be at a given time. But the advantage is, here's that second section. If I don't get into some of the material here that I thought I needed to, I don't need to push it into the next unit. I just keep moving along. So that's topics. It's organized by my topic, which in this case is a unit. So I prefer the topics and weekly format. So format because ultimately I like my kids to be moving at different paces, and therefore your next option here things that you're going to want to play. There's not really a due date that's common for everybody. There's some, but most aren't. And two is that even if I am having everyone move at the same pace, what those weeks are. So actually, I might move at a pace different than I plan to, and I don't like being constrained to having to keep things in a box by the appropriate date. So let's move on over back into settings. And you will recall that we were just talking about formats, and we said that topics and weekly format were your best options here. Notice also that we have a date up here. That date is going to define your weeks. So if I change, let's say that our course is actually going to start in December. And it's going to start on the 14th. 2013. Oops, I didn't change it back to weekly. I changed the date, but not the format. So I'm going to change this to weekly. What you'll notice is that the dates on the blocks will change. So before this started sometime in October, now we're back to December, based on the start date, and it's just going to keep going and going and dating them. And as I add these blocks, it'll just date them automatically. I'll show you where you do that. So here, the number of topics. You see, I can just keep adding and adding and adding and adding, and obviously 52 would be the max that you could add. For a weekly format, because that's how many weeks there are in a year. I believe you're limited to the same number of topics. Right, so 52 is the maximum number of topics you can have. So once I'm in topics format, this date doesn't really become important. Each one of those is called a section. I was calling it a block. Each one is called a section, and you notice that I hadn't used them all yet. If I hide sections, hidden sections are completely invisible. You don't see them at all. And this option would mean that they're shown, but they're just collapsed. So let's see what that looks like. And this has to do with that I again. So you can see that I'm using these two blocks, these two sections, and then these down here I have hidden. So my I is closed. When I switch to what it looks like as a student, and remember this time I've changed my settings so that hidden sections are shown in collapsed form, I can see them as a student. I can see that they're there, but they're just not available yet. Whereas if I go back and I go to my settings, notice that I didn't turn editing on here. You can still access settings without editing being turned on, but I can't manipulate anything in with those blocks or that content pane until I turn the editing on. So here, instead of showing them in collapsed form, let's just make them invisible. And this time, they won't be there at all as a student. So they're there. I see them. But when I go in as a student, now they're completely gone. I prefer it this way because that way they're not down there as a distraction. Where they might be helpful, however, is if you're wanting to show kids sort of the flight path. This is where we're going. Okay, so we've talked about the format, whether we're going to use topics or weekly. We said social is not something that, if that's what you're interested in, Moodle may not be the best tool for you. I would go ahead and set this to something large, so that if students are uploading a video or an audio file, that it will fit. And this is going to determine for everything that you put out there where you let students upload something, what's the maximum size that they can upload. Okay, force theme. This is another one that impacts what things look like. I tend to like formal white or standard white, and I'm not going to show you all of these, but I select one, hit save, and then when I come back, it's going to change the way that my course looks. So you can play with what this does. It does things like changing, obviously, your banner up here. It changes what your blocks look like and what typeface that they use in different places. And I'll show you one more. Let's go with metal. Okay, so you see a different look. In this case, it actually removes entirely that header. So you're going to play with what you like. I started with formal white. I will show you my second favorite, which is standard white. Maybe it's just standard. No, there it is, standard white. So I usually go with one of those two just because it keeps things really simple. Let's just double check here if there's anything else you need to really pay attention to. So we said, as you come in here to set up, choose a format. Topics are weekly, and I would just stay away from this one. Topics are weekly. Whether you want to show or hide the sections that are not being used. I prefer to make them invisible. Bump up your maximum upload size, and then choose your theme. You can ignore enrollments. We'll come back later to availability, but in short, what this is the course is either available or not to students. If you are working in it and you don't want students to be able to find this course, set it to not available. If you want them to be able to enroll, then you make it available, and you can give them an enrollment key. So you can say, hey kids, go to Moodle, search for my course, and register for it, and here's the enrollment key that you're going to need. Go Heels 1-2. Another way to enroll, as we'll discuss later, is to actually just have me help you do that, where we just actually add the kids manually and the course is just there for them. That's a more reliable way to make sure you get everybody in. But just so you know, that's what this is here. And I guess for the purposes of this discussion, if you don't want kids to be able to find it at all while you're working, just make it not available to students. Roles, ignore. That's if you want to call yourself something different. Instead of teacher, you want to call yourself whatever else. I never change the roles. And of course, whatever changes you make, I want to make sure I didn't do anything crazy. Topics, standard white. Yeah, I didn't do anything weird. Save. Okay, so that's what you want to, that concludes this video on setting up the structure of your Moodle course.